so today we're going to be looking at a good money strategy to grow your wealth for a happy financial future. And in order to achieve the things that we want to do in life that cost money, we do need to have a money plan that helps us to get there. And although, we're all very sure, aren't we, money doesn't buy us happiness, it can provide stability and make it easier to plan for the future. And if we want to save money for our future goals, we need to make sure that our money is working as hard as it can for us by growing over time. So in the next 25 minutes, you'll learn how to grow your wealth. So we're going to do an easy to follow action plan. So we're going to look at setting your money goals, spending less than you earn, preparing for emergencies, protecting your assets, investing for the future, and reviewing your progress. And then there'll be a Q&A as well. So just before we start, though, I just want to let you know that Better With Money is an independent company. So I'm just providing information, not advice today. And also, if I am mentioning companies and websites, it's just because we think they offer good services, not because we're financially incentivized or linked to them in any way. Right, so before we think about how to grow our wealth, we first need to think about, what do you want our money to do for us? And that's all about setting our money goals. So just try to think about, what do you want your money to do for you in the short, medium, or long term? Now, a short-term goal is going to be something you need to focus on now. And for a lot of people, that'll be getting through December without putting too much on credit cards so that we don't start January with that financial hangover. Medium-term goal will be something, that you're saving for in the next 3 to 5 years. One of my goals is saving enough money to take my family on that holiday of a lifetime. And your long-term goals should be really focused more on your future, maybe your retirement, such as having enough money to stop working or traveling and seeing more of the world. But whatever your thoughts, when it comes to a money plan and growing wealth, just work out what you want your goals to be, because it's those that are going to give you the motivation to manage your finances and assign that purpose to your money. Because once you know what you're aiming for, then you can build your plan around that. With your money goals set, the next step is really to find a way of saving for your goals to grow your wealth. And to do that, you do need to be spending less than you're earning. So you really need to understand, what is life costing you? And the way to do that is to set your budget. And your budget is quite simply comparing what money have you got coming in each month. So that'll be your salary, your benefits, your rent, comparing that with what you're spending on your essentials, what you're spending on debt payments, and what you're spending on those nice to haves. Now, you don't need anything fancy to do a budget, just a pen and paper and a little bit of time in order to get it all down. But if you do want to use something more sophisticated, please do check out what budgetary tools your bank offers. They're really coming on and improving those at the moment. Or if you want to, you can use the Better With Money budget planner that you'll find on our website. As you're writing down your budget, what your outgoings are, my suggestion is you do not do that off the top of your head, because you are going to forget those spontaneous spends, those impulse buys. So please think about printing off your most recent bank statement, or even just going through your app line by line, and almost every single line that you've got, highlight that entry and record it onto your budget planner, because that is what's going to give you that really true picture of what's being spent. Because it's very easy, particularly at this time of year when we're just buying little gifts for people, to forget some of those things that we're spending. And that's an important point. Whilst you're doing your budget, don't forget the things that happen once a year. We've got an annual budget planner on the website as well that you can print off, and you can put things in there like your car insurance, your MOT, the birthdays, the Christmas. For example, now is a brilliant time to budget for next Christmas. I know we're not even at this one yet, but think about 2023. Get to the end of this year, work out how much it's cost you over the last few months on Christmas, divide that number by 12, put it into your budget planner from January so that you can start to save for it. The other thing I'd say about when you're sorting out your budget is think about, have I got any costs that are going to go up over the next year? For example, we know at the moment we've got an energy price guarantee, which is going to take us through to April 2023. But at that point, energy prices are likely to go up again. The underlying costs are going up 20% in January. They're not going to be passed on to us until April, but the likelihood is our bills are going to be going up. So just as you're doing the budget, think about what's coming up as well. Because then once you've written out what have I got coming in, what have I got going out, it should really help you to identify, am I spending less than I earn? Because that's where I need to get to in order to grow my wealth. If you're spending more than you earn, try and be honest about where it's coming from. Because to grow your wealth, it's essential that you're not wasting money. So I've just put a few things here that we can all look at to make sure our money isn't going on unneeded things. Firstly, many of us waste hundreds of pounds every year paying for products and services that we don't need, we don't ever use. Things like magazines, gyms, Amazon Prime, subscriptions. So now's the time to really get to grips with what direct debits have I got, what standing orders have I got, and cancel those ones that you don't need. Diarise to do that twice a year. And I have put a link here. Money Saving Expert has got the direct debit audit. Take a look at that. Some really great tips for making sure you're not wasting money. Next, try and cut back on the food shopping costs. Many of us spend about 1/5 of our income every month on food. Anything we can do to keep out of the supermarket, the better, because everything they do is just there to tempt us into spending as much as possible. Also, use your strategies like writing a meal plan, going to cheaper supermarkets for those bulk buys, and not shopping while you're hungry. All of these things can cut 20% off your shopping bill just like that. And again, I've included a guide to cheap supermarket shopping. One of the biggest bills that we've got every month is council tax. It's a really easy check to make sure we're not overpaying, because many of us are in the wrong council tax band. Particularly people in England and Scotland, there's a huge amount of people being overcharged. So again, look at the guide I've put here. Make sure that your house is in the right council tax band so you're not being overcharged. The other thing to look at the moment as well, if you're not already on one, is should you be on a water meter? Usually, if you've got more bedrooms in your house than the number of people living there, you would be better off on a water meter rather than paying a fixed price. And although you can't switch providers like you can for energy for your water, you can save hundreds of pounds a year just by being charged correctly. So what I've done here is I've put the calculator so you can work out whether being on a fixed charged or a water meter is better for you. And at the moment, whilst energy prices are really so high, I have just put a link to the Citizens Advice website that you can work out how much your appliances are costing you day by day. We might not want to know how much boiling the kettle is costing us every time, but at least if we know that there's a high price associated, we can think about our behaviours and how we might be able to reduce that. So anything we can do around the home on our day-to-day living costs to bring that down means we're going to have more money to save and more money to grow our wealth. The other area to look at to make sure you're not wasting money is debt. Often debt payments will be one of the biggest sources of spending in a month. So we need to make sure we're paying it back as efficiently and as cheaply as possible. Now, often the interest we pay to borrow money is extremely high. So, for example, banks are charging us 40% on overdrafts, and store cards and credit cards are charging us anywhere between 20 and 30%. Even car loans, we might be paying up to 15% on those. So a really easy way to bring down that debt is to bring that debt together, consolidate it under one credit card or one loan. Now, many credit cards at the moment are offering balance transfers, which means that they're not going to charge you any interest for a set period of time. And if you've got a good credit score, you could get a 0% credit card for up to 3 years. If you've got more than about £5,000 on debt, you might find that a low interest loan is better value. Most of the low interest loans are charging about 5 to 6%. So to find out the best cards or the best loans for you, please do use an eligibility checker. Again, I've put the website of the Money Saving Expert website. It takes about 10 minutes to do their eligibility checker, but it will put you in a really good idea as to which cards and which loans you might be able to apply for that are going to bring those interest payments down. The second tip, if you have got credit cards or store cards that for whatever reason you can't consolidate, they're not on 0%, just paying a few pounds above minimum payment every month can make a massive difference to how long you pay that debt for. Please do check out our credit card calculator on the Better with Money website. It will show you the effect of just paying £2 or £3 above the minimum, and you'll be amazed. Also know that you should be reviewing your mortgage regularly if you've got one. If you're coming to the end of a fixed rate, please do speak to a mortgage advisor to see the best rate that you can get at the moment. Many people are looking to fix mortgages for 2 to 5 years whilst interest rates are rising, just to give them that certainty of cost for the next few years whilst our cost of living is high. So if you haven't reviewed your mortgage recently, take a look at that guide from Money Helper that's going to show you the best way of doing that. And lastly, it's absolutely always best to use savings to pay off high interest debt. We can't start growing our wealth if we've still got high interest debt staying there. So really sorting out your debt should be one of your first priorities to put you in that really good position to start thinking about, right, what can I do with my money? How can I grow it for the future? And of course, the point of these last two slides has all been about not wasting money. If we want to grow wealth, we need to make sure that our money is working as hard as it can for us and that we're being efficient with it. Once your budget is set, you've done your money saving actions, at that point, and once you've managed to reduce your debt as much as possible, then you need to think about saving for emergencies. That is definitely port of call number one. Now, it's a good money management to have an emergency fund in place that you've got easy access to, that's equivalent to about 3 months of your day-to-day living costs. Trying to save smaller, regular amounts is often far more effective than trying to save large amounts now and again. That's because you get into the savings habit and those small amounts are affordable ongoing. Now, the best place to set up your emergency fund is an instant access interest-bearing account. Many of our banks nowadays have got piggy banking facilities, which is where we can earmark our money into different pots for different purposes. And the great thing about the piggy banking is that your money doesn't have to leave your account. It just gets hidden from your view. So these piggy bank facilities are really, really great for short-term goals. So check out what your bank offers if you haven't already. If you can't afford to save regularly, or you think that you can't, do look to see whether your bank uses the roundup facilities. So this is where whatever purchases you have, let's say you're spending £1.95 in a shop, your bank rounds it up to £2 and they put that 5p, rounding it up to the next pound, into a savings pot. That can add up very, very quickly. You don't even really know that you're saving. And all of those savings that you get can start to help towards those unexpected costs in that emergency fund. But remember, even emergency savings should be used to pay off high interest debt first. It makes good financial sense. But once you've got rid of the debt, get that emergency fund in place. And what I've done is I've included the guide from Step Change to emergency savings, just in case you want some further reading on that one. Once you've got your short-term savings, then it's time to think about what you can do with your money for the medium term. So that's 5 years or more. Now, you might not want to keep your medium-term savings in your bank, and here's why. Because although the money in the bank, your money is safe, your capital is safe, because there's very low interest rates, probably as low as 1-2% on easy access accounts at the moment, it means your money isn't keeping pace with inflation. You're not going to be able to buy as much with that money next year as you can this year. And that is why people look to invest money in stocks and shares when they're saving for goals that are more than 5 years away. Because although the stock market can be volatile and company shares can go up and down on a daily basis, if you look at that graph on the bottom left there, you'll see that if you put £1,000 in a bank account at the beginning of 2012, it would now be worth £1,158 because of the interest, which has been very, very low over the last few years. If you'd invested that money in a balanced fund, which means it's got lots and lots of different companies, shares in there all across the world, if you'd invested your money in that balanced fund, it could be worth now £2,763. So, more than double than had you just left it in cash. And again, although that fund has gone up and down on a daily basis, as you'll see from that wiggly orange line, over the long term, the stock market always outperforms cash if you can keep that money invested for 5 years or more. Even with the recent stock market downturn, your money would have been worth more by investing it in the stock market than leaving it in that bank account. But of course, there's no guarantee. So you need to work out your own attitude to risk and whether investing is for you. Excuse me, that was a sneeze. If you do want to invest money, ISAs are what you should be looking at first. This is because you can still invest in balanced funds or other funds of your choice within an ISA, but there are some tax efficiencies that ISAs have that you don't get with current accounts. So first of all, you pay no tax on any interest or investment returns that you get within an ISA. And if you want to take your money out of an ISA, you don't pay capital gains tax. Now, at present, you can pay up to £20,000 into an ISA, and you can have a mix. You can have some money in an ISA put in cash and some put in stocks and shares. Now, if you want to look at the best ISAs available, again, please do look at the Money Saving Expert website. That's the Martin Lewis website. They've got a whole team of researchers that update the information about the different ISAs available on a day-to-day basis, and that is under the banking and savings section. Now, if you want to grow your wealth to meet your long-term goals, usually this is for money to provide for you when you get older and you want to reduce or you want to stop work. And without doubt, the most tax-efficient way of growing your wealth for the long term is through your workplace pension. Now, since 2012, every employer has had to automatically enroll you into their pension scheme as long as you're over the age of 22 and you're earning at least £10,000 a year. Now, when you pay money into your pension, you don't pay any tax at all on that money. You receive tax relief at your highest rate. When it goes into that pension pot, it grows tax-free. And then later on, when you withdraw that money out, you can have up to 25% of it tax-free as well. That's what makes pensions so tax efficient and one of the best ways of growing your wealth for the future. However, the main thing to understand about pensions is you can't access those savings at the moment until you're 55, but that age is going up to 57 in 2028. So any money you put into pensions really does have to be for the long term. But of course, pensions is all about investing that money in those stocks and shares for the long term to try and get as much growth on that money as you possibly can. If you want to work out what you think your pensions could be worth in future, please do look at that pension calculator that we've got at the bottom here. It's on our Better with Money website. You can look at bringing all your pensions together, how much it's going to provide you, and the effect of just paying a little bit more. But of course, as you can see on this slide, pensions are just going to be one form of wealth in retirement. You're also going to get income from state pension and benefits. You might even want to continue to work part-time. You might have savings in your ISAs. You might inherit money. You might have property. You should take all of these into account when thinking about growing your wealth for the future. But if you do decide to invest money, and investing money for the long term is really the way that you're going to grow your wealth and get your money to work for you, I just wanted to look at the effect of starting to invest your money earlier. I'm going to do this by looking at Erica and Craig. Now, Erica starts saving into her pension. It doesn't have to be a pension. It could be an ISA, but for this purpose, I'm just using a pension. Erica starts saving into her pension at age 25. She's putting in £100 a month. She puts it in for 40 years until she gets to 65. Now, we're assuming that her pension pot is growing about 5% every year. And this is very, very realistic from a pension point of view when you've got many years to invest. So her contribution, her total contribution of £48,000 grows over time by 105,000. So by the time she gets to 65, her pension pot is worth just over £153,000. Now, if we look at Craig decided that he had other things to do with his money in his 20s and 30s, so he didn't start paying into his pension until he was 45. So he's had to pay in £200 a month, so double what Erica has, because he's started 20 years later and he's going to be paying for half the time. So although he's paid in the same amount as Erica when he gets to 65, his 48,000 has only grown by 34,000. So his total pot at 65 is worth just over 82,000. That's half of the amount of money that Erica's got because she started to invest that money and make that money really work for her and grow her wealth 20 years earlier. So as you can see, investing earlier, you're going to benefit from that compound growth. Your money does the work for you. Now, one of the things to watch out for is that many employers will actually pay more into your pension if you decide to pay more in as well. They'll match contributions up to a set limit. It really is one of the best ways of growing your wealth for the future and boosting those pension savings. It's just like a free pay rise. So please do take a look at what you need to put into your pension to get the maximum from your employer. But of course, there's other forms of investment. We've spoken about ISAs and pensions and the tax advantages associated with those. So they would normally be your first port of call. So ISAs for medium-term savings and your pension for long-term savings. But some people, for example, choose to invest in property instead of funds. And the same premise applies. The earlier you can invest, as long as that property is structurally sound, it's well maintained, and you keep it for a number of years, that's also a way that you can grow your wealth. But you could also invest in things like commodities, which are things like metal and agriculture, all the way through to things like art or wine or stamps. I was actually at a gathering yesterday, and someone was saying that at the moment, they're investing in watches because there's a lot of parts within watches that apparently are very difficult to get at the moment. So particularly some of those higher end watches are gaining money. So, investing doesn't just have to be around stocks and shares. It can be about all sorts of things. But really, when you're investing and you're trying to grow your wealth for the future, one of the things that can be helpful is having lots of different types of investments, so that if one of your investments doesn't do so well, the others will be performing to counteract that. That's called diversifying. But investing money to grow your wealth for the future is always a risk. You could get less back than you put in. Now, if you want to hear more about investing, we recently did another webinar called Investment for Beginners. You can take a look at the ICE Ben website or the Support Network website. Both of them, you can watch that Investment for Beginners webinar on catch up or on demand. Now, the really important thing, when you're investing, when you're saving, when you're trying to grow your wealth, is that you should review your progress regularly. So here's just the list of the things that you should do. Think about setting your money goals so you know what you want to achieve. Really understand your budget, because the real aim here is that you spend less than you earn. Then you should think about creating those emergency savings. That should always be your first port of call in an easy access account so that you can get that money out if you need to. And only once you've done that, you should then think about growing your assets, investing your money, whether that's in ISAs for the medium term, pensions for the long term, or maybe some of those other investments that we spoke about, things like property and commodities. But remember, it keeps pace with, it's likely to keep pace with inflation, but investing is for the long term, particularly things like pensions. You want to be looking at 10 years or more to invest that money. And of course, always review regularly. Make sure that you know what your money's doing, make sure it's in the right place for you, and make sure you're comfortable with the level of risk that you're taking. Before I finish today and open it up for questions, I just wanted to remind you of the fantastic services that are offered by the ICE Ben Fund and Support Network. They've both sponsored the webinar today. You can get financial, workplace and wellbeing support through the funds for not just you and your families. So I've put the website and the helpline numbers here so that you can find out more. Brilliant. Well, that's all of the content, Sarah. Over to you for any questions.
Thank you very much. We've got a number of questions, so we may have to address a couple of them in a document after the session. But to start with, is it better to have a mortgage or rent? Do you have any advice?
Oh, okay. So, the first thing I'll say here is it is going to completely depend on your own circumstances, because, of course, there are some people that haven't managed to save the deposit that you would need for a mortgage. You need at least 5% deposit for a mortgage nowadays. My own personal view, probably from experience, is that the sooner you can get onto the property market, actually, the better. Property, just like other investments, just like stocks and shares, can be volatile. We're expecting, if we, what we hear is correct, that maybe house prices will start going down over the next year. And the reason for that is that fewer people can actually afford mortgages. Less people are going to be looking to buy houses, and when demand goes down, prices go down as well. So if you can get onto the property market, you can afford that mortgage, and then you can start paying that off. Of course, not only are you you're investing, you're not paying any more than you probably would in rent, but you've also got an investment there. It's an asset that hopefully over the long term is going to grow over time, irrespective of whether house prices fall or rise in any particular year. Over the long term, normally, as long as that house is structurally sound, you should see a growth in that investment over a number of years. So that's my own personal opinion.
That's great. Thank you very much. We've had someone tell us that they've recently been investing in index funds, using stocks and shares, ISA, doing their own research, etc., etc. And they're looking at long-term investments. Would you recommend speaking to a financial advisor, or is this a waste of money?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And again, I guess it's going to depend on sort of where you are in your career and how much money you have to invest. I would say for the average person, with the tools at their disposal, like understanding you can put up to £20,000 into ISAs, you can invest up to £40,000 a year into pensions. If you're not maxing those two things out, then it might be that you want to do that first before talking to a financial advisor about what other things are out there. But for example, if you're coming up to retirement and actually you're looking at all the different things that you have, and you really want to understand at what point you might be able to afford to retire, that's when a financial advisor will really come into their own, because they will look at all your different assets. They will put that into a tool, they will plot it, and they will show you the level of income that you're likely to have at any given point in time, and whether you're likely to outsurvive the money that you've saved or not. Financial advisors absolutely have their place, but unless you're at a point probably where you're maxing out ISAs on a yearly basis, you probably don't need to, but it will depend on your individual circumstances. I'm sorry about being a bit wishy-washy on that, but I really would need to speak to that person individually to find out. But generally, I would say probably only 5 to 10% of people under the age of 40 would need to see one.
That's great. And on the subject of pensions, is there any reason to go above the maximum amount of which an employer would match?
Yes, of course, because the more you can save now, the more you're going to have for the future. And different employers will pay different things. So, for example, I know an employer that will match up to 5%, for example. So you put in 5 and they'll pay 5 and you've got 10. But paying in 10% is still, unfortunately, in today's terms, unlikely to get you to the level of pension that you want. A very rough rule of thumb: whatever age you started paying into your pension, divide that by 2, and that's really the percentage you should be putting in to provide yourself with the same level of life that you've got at the moment. So, for example, if you didn't start paying into your pension until you were 30, divide that by 2, that's 15. So the combined contribution between you and your employer in an ideal world would be 15%. Now, of course, there's always going to be things like, at the moment, we're having the cost of living crisis, energy prices are going up. It might be you can't afford that, but always have that figure in mind. And if you can put more money into pensions and leave it there for the long term, that's going to be by far your most tax efficient way of saving.
Brilliant. And we just have someone asking for some clarification on a previous comment. So could you repeat your comment about investing up to 40,000 per year? Someone has said they thought the limit was 20,000 per year. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Yes, so ISAs, the limit is £20,000 a year into an ISA per adult in the UK. But for pensions, you can put in it's the lower of your salary or £40,000 a year. So, for example, if you were earning £30,000, you could put up to £30,000 a year into pensions. If you're earning £60,000 a year, then the limit is 40. 40 is the cap. And that's that's because you get so many tax advantages with pensions that the government do limit the amount of tax relief you can get. So the maximum most people, if you're earning over £40,000, can put into pensions is £40,000. I hope that's clear. If you're earning less than £40,000, your annual salary will be your cap.